Camera, action. Welcome to At the Movies, your one-stop source for all the latest information on all of the upcoming movies coming out in a theater near you. I am the Tominator, the only man who has seen John Wick 3 10 times, alongside my co-host, community leader, and the Yak Attack, Jacob Bard. Jacob, how are we doing today?
It is so hot, and the only thing that can take my mind off this crazy heat wave is to discuss the one and only thing that I love, and that is cinema, movies.
Well, lights, camera, action, my friend. We are going to put you on the spotlight today as we have a lot to talk about. It is certainly a heat wave that we haven't seen here in New York City in many years, and I can tell you, I just came back from The Lion King at the AMC theaters over in the Staten Island Mall, and as I was waiting for my Uber to pick me up, I have to say, Mr. Bard, it was hot and hotter. But I gotta tell you, we are definitely gonna cool our audience here with some cool movies to talk about, and certainly we have a lot to discuss here over the next hour or so here on this latest episode of At the Movies, and I certainly thank everybody for listening, and I want to thank everybody for listening to our opening show. It certainly was a very successful episode, and we had a lot to talk about, and I think that if you liked the first episode we did, you're going to definitely like this episode. We're going to have our friend Rob Morosca from the Sports Report. He has a new podcast that he's working on called It's a Miserable Life. He's also a huge movie guy. He's going to come on here for a few minutes, in about 10 minutes or so, and talk about some of the movies that, we're going to talk about here over the next hour or so, and some of the movies that are coming out in a theater near you, because the summer is in the thick of movie season, and my friend, we have a lot of movies to talk about, but I think the first one that I want to talk about with you, because I just saw it a little while ago here, is before we were about to record and start the show, is The Lion King. And I gotta say, for you, Mr. Bard, whom I actually couldn't even say that correctly, but I'm tongue-tied over this movie, and let's talk about The Lion King and what your thoughts were on this movie. I think you were trying to say what I was intending to say, so that's why we have you here as our co-host, and that's why we pay you the big bucks here on At the Movies. So talk a little bit about The Lion King for you and how you liked it.
Okay, so obviously this movie has some big shoes to fill from the original 1994 animated Lion King. And, the latest trend is to make all these animated movies from Disney into live action films.
Sure.
And they deliver. I mean, to me, the original Lion King will always be the GOAT, the greatest of all time. But this did not fall short. It delivered, and the casting was amazing. The voice, the actors that voiced all these characters were just fantastic, and some beautiful shots of African wildlife. I thoroughly enjoyed that movie.
Yeah, you know what? If you look at this movie, and without giving it away, I think it stayed true to the original 1994 movie. You had all the references, the Circle of Life, Hakuna Matata. You had the references of Simba and Mustafa, and you had all of the references there. Obviously Nala. I actually enjoyed this more than the original animated movie. I was 9, I think it was 8 or 9 when the first one came out, the animated movie, and that was sort of a big deal for my childhood, and it was literally a circle of life here, Yak Attack, and seeing that as an adult, I'm now watching The Lion King, in a live version, and I got to say, I don't know about you, but I actually saw this movie in 3D, and for me, this was the kind of movie that 3D added big time to this movie. You talk about the scenes, you talk about the animals, you had the lions in the Himalayas, and you had the elephants, and you had the elephant graveyard, and you sort of had that African wildlife setting. And even at the end of the movie, without not with giving it away, you had sort of the scenery and just the fire, and all the characters within it. To me, it really added something to this movie. This was the kind of movie where, I know we talked about it on the first episode, about 3D and whether we liked it, or, what do you think of it? Does it make a big difference? But for me, it really added something with this movie. I'm sure some of the movies that we're going to talk about over the course of the next hour, you probably wouldn't make much of a difference. You can make that argument, but that's at least how I interpreted it. For you, Yak Attack, how did you see the movie?
So I was originally going to see it in 3D, but then I had to cancel my showtime. So the other available showtime I was able to pick was not in 3D. So I kind of regret not watching it in 3D.
Yeah, you know what? I texted you, as I was watching the movie here just a little while ago, and I said, I don't know how you could not have watched it in 3D. From the very opening scenes, it was just, you felt you were right in the African wildlife. You felt like you were in the midst. And, even when, young Simba is running around, and, even, with his scenes with Nala, and you had, Pumbaa and Timon, and, just the way that they came across as characters. And, 3D for me, this is the kind of movie you got to see in 3D, at least for me.
Yeah, and then while I was watching that movie, I was able to, oh crap, this would have been so much better if I watched it in 3D. I was able to see how the 3D would have been able to be maximized to its full potential.
Yeah, and this is the kind of movie where, you really felt immersed in the movie. Sometimes you watch a movie, wherever you may watch it at your local theater, and you don't quite get that experience. I really felt, though, with this movie, while it did have, some scenes that, I'm not quite sure young children would understand, or necessarily, their parents might, feel so comfortable with, I think the overall movie really is a kind of movie that you would want to see with all different types of, whether it be, girlfriend or, husband, wife with the kids. But the 3D experience really put you in this movie, where I really think that this movie, in a lot of ways, was perfect in terms of the timing. I'm not so sure necessarily, without giving the movie away, in terms of the storyline, which I don't want to do, but I want to give our listeners certainly an experience on what they can expect. In a lot of ways, and I hate doing this because you know how much, and I think our listeners do, how much I love John Wick 3. But, there was a scene in the movie where, Simba was in the desert and he was kind of lost, and he was just going around, and you kind of saw him kind of, fall down, and he was kind of like, he was almost like a vulture, and it almost reminded me of John Wick for whatever reason. But this was the kind of movie.
Simba was seeking passage.
He certainly was, and he did find his passage to Casablanca. It wasn't quite Casablanca as it was in John Wick 3, and I don't think Simba, was a killing machine like John Wick. But, talk about, some of the characters in the movie. Who did you like? Who didn't you like? What were your overall impressions on that?
So to me, I'll tell you this about the movie, and I can't help but to compare it to the original one.
Sure.
And one of the reasons why, I mean, you say you like this movie better than the original. I personally, to me, I was able to relate a lot better to the original one because, for one, the animation was able to convey emotion a lot better than when you use live animals. There's only that much emotion you can get out of a live animal, but with you're talking about characters. I mean, Scar. They made Scar look so evil in that original movie. He comes across such an evil mofo.
This movie, I agree with you.
And Scar in this movie, it just looks like a regular lion.
He was also like a narcissist in this movie, where yes, he was the bad guy, and yes, he wanted to be king, and obviously there was some friction there with Mustafa. Without going into details, what happens between him and Mustafa, but certainly there's no question that the character of Scars was definitely not the original movie. You know, some, I don't want to say humor to him, but he almost kind of came off like a narcissist where he was a little bit arrogant. You know, he wasn't somebody that, you know, you really felt like this guy, you know, he's a serial killer. He's cold-blooded. Yes, he was more power hungry, I felt.
But you know what I mean? Like, you know, when Simba cries, the crying comes across a lot more like you know, when you know, you have these cartoonish eyes popping out.
Well, The Lion King was always a cartoon. You know, don't forget, you know, you really couldn't interpret the movie 25 years ago because it was already done. So in order for this to work, you had to have, I kind of think, a live action interpretation of it. The movie did try to stay within, you know, the boundaries of the original movie. You know,
it was more or less the original movie, like frame by frame, shot by shot.
Okay.
It was pretty much the exact same movie, just in live action. The storyline pretty much didn't deviate.
No, but I also think that it's important for them not deviate so much because you got to remember the original movie came out. You know, for a lot of the, you know, even our listeners who are going to watch this movie based, you know, possibly off our review. You know, a lot of the audience watching this movie wasn't, you know, alive when the original movie came out. You know, I was a child when it came out. You know, you were probably very little. So you look at, you know, our generation who grew up on that movie, you know, now are adults and have children, but the children that, you know, our generation may have didn't, you know, they may not have seen the original movie or they didn't see it when it came out. So they're in a way trying to respect, you know, original movie. Talk a little bit about sort of the voice actors.
So Timon and Pumbaa was probably the best casting decision that they made, with Billy Eichner as Timon and Seth Rogen as Pumbaa. They just fit the role so well. I mean, anyone who's aware of Seth Rogen knows that he has a voice that's very much like Pumbaa.
Listen, Seth Rogen for me, you know, I mean, I did enjoy, you know, Donald Glover as Simba, adult Simba, but Seth Rogen for me really made the movie interesting.
And you know, and basically they, you know, Timon and Pumbaa are like the comedy relief of the movie because it's such
and they sort of come in toward like the halfway point of the movie.
Yes.
Okay.
And Beyonce was great as adult Nala.
Yes, Beyonce actually also sang in the movie as well.
Yes, we got to hear it sing too. So that was a treat.
Did you like Donald Glover as adult Simba?
I think it was. He did a good job. He did a pretty good job.
You know, one of our listeners who listens to this show, the president of the Shorefront Coalition, a man you know well, Mr. Bard, Stephen Saperstein, you know, former city council and assembly candidate out in your neck of the woods in South Brooklyn, actually texted a photo that he took when he was in college of Donald Glover. You know, so apparently Mr. Saperstein has some connections to Mr. Glover. Maybe he could use it in terms of some of the ideals and storylines in the movie, but we do digress. And you know, for you, was there anything you disliked in the movie?
No, I think the movie, for what it was a great movie. I mean, it's just. And
the box office certainly, you know, showcased that with, I think, $185 million.
Yeah.
According to BoxOfficeMojo.com, thanks to the crack staff for giving us that statistic. So certainly, you know, moviegoers wanted to see this movie, and certainly, you know, when I went to the movie a little while ago over at the AMC Theater over in the Staten Island Mall, it was a big crowd. It was, you know, a lot of people there. A lot of people were excited about the movie. I saw people with Lion King shirts, you know, going to the next showing after as I left the auditorium in the Staten Island Mall. So certainly you had a lot of interest and excitement for this movie. You know, you saw the billboards for this movie now for a long time, and I think certainly people are going to get their money's worth for it. So for you, you give it out of 5 stars. How many would you give it?
I would give it a 3.5.
All right. I would probably go with a 4. And the reason I would go with it as a 4 is because I really liked the 3D aspect of it. I actually happen to like the live aspect of it. I really thought that, the storylines, you really felt good about this movie. It's not a tearjerker, certainly you don't get that tearjerker element of, which is sort of a good thing. I don't like to end or go with movies with sort of that type of, aspect. But
I'll say this about the live action aspect of it. The director of this movie, John Favreau, is not a newcomer to live action.
And he's in a movie that we're going to talk about in a little while as well. So Mr. Favreau is definitely a very busy man these days.
Oh yeah, so he did the adaptation of the Jungle Book, and he turned Jungle Book into a live action.
That was another movie I remember, in elementary school.
Yeah, did you see the live action adaptation of it?
I did not see that, but certainly that's going to be on my list. So certainly that's why we have you here, Yak Attack. You're definitely giving us movies to go see for homework after this show, and the Jungle Book is definitely going to be on my list for sure.
I mean, if you liked what John Favreau did to Lion King, you're going to love what he did to Jungle Book.
I liked it a lot. That's why I gave it a 4. I really felt, the live characters. I think the middle part of the movie really gets exciting for me. I think sort of the end of the movie, I think, is very exciting. You have that kind of twist and twist and turn without giving it away. You really felt, strong with the dialogue. You had, adult Nala comes back, and you have that sort of, interaction with Simba, and, you see what happens to the land with Simba, where Simba comes back, and you have this whole, interaction, and, Simba, you see him as a character develop, and, I really think the whole circle of life aspect comes in play, again, without giving it away to the end of the movie. But, there is, I think some graphics to it that are a little bit, maybe graphic for our younger listeners. I think it's a PG rating at the box office. I think it definitely, is not a G movie. I think it's a little step above G movie. Would you agree with me on that?
Yeah, there's definitely certain parts that could be a drop disturbing to the kids.
All right,
specifically one scene in particular is really, really could be traumatizing for some kids.
You know what? You may say one. I could point 3 or 4 scenes, and this is coming from the guy that's seen John Wick 3 10 times. I mean, so listen. I think I've seen more graphic scenes, in my 10 times seeing John Wick 3 than some kids might see in a lifetime. But you and I probably weren't, weirded out by it, or it didn't bother us so much. But certainly, for our younger listeners, they may have to have viewer discretion as advised. But I still think it's a good movie. Parents should certainly go with their kids and enjoy it. It's a good night out and a good day out, and especially on a weekend like this where, it feels like, hell is certainly, has touched New York City. And certainly I think that The Lion King is a good outlet to get away from that. So I think we're in consensus with The Lion King. It's a good movie, and I think our listeners should definitely check it out. And it's going to be playing all summer long at a theater near you, and we definitely recommend this movie for our listeners to see. We're going to bring on our next guest here. Do we have our New York Mets analyst here, and William Patterson, DJ, and man of many different trades, and I know he's working on his big show coming out to a website near you. It's A Miserable Life, Mr. Rob Morosca.
Yes, hi guys. Good Sunday afternoon.
Oh, it's a very hot and hotter afternoon here in the city of New York, and certainly we're talking some movies to try to cool everyone down here. So we're going to get into a movie that I think that you're going to be interested in a little bit here, that you may have seen or want to see, and that's Stuber. So Stuber was a movie that Mr. Barden and myself saw last week. It's a movie that its main characters, one of them is a person you may or may not know named Dave Bautista. He was in sort of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, and he's been in a number of movies with a WWE wrestler, and it's sort of a cop buddy movie, and we're certainly going to get your opinions on it here in a second and see if it's something you might want to see. But I want to get my co-host to jump in here because we actually saw the movie last week together at the AMC Empire movie theaters over in Times Square last Sunday on a day very similar to this, but it actually felt a little cooler, which is kind of scary to think when last Sunday was pretty hot. But for you, Yak Attack, Is Stuber a movie that our listeners should see? And certainly if, Mr. Morosca, who's been interested in the movie, I know he was talking to me, before the air and certainly during our sports report production meetings about Stuber and if it's a movie that he, and his beautiful fiance should see and anybody else. So give us your hard-hitting analysis on Stuber.
So here's the deal. One of my favorite movies, my favorite genres, I should say, are action comedies. And Stuber delivers. Now, Stuber delivers both on the action, maybe more action than comedy, but there's quite amount of comedy in there as well. And you got Dave Bautista, you got Kumail Nanjiani,
and you also have an actress that you may know, Mr. Morosca, an Academy Award winner, Mira Sorvino. The lovely Mira Sorvino. Of course, her father is the legendary Paul Sorvino, and she's sort of the main villain in the movie. She's sort of a good guy throughout the movie without giving it away. Any others, she certainly plays a big role in that. And talk a little bit about Yak. Why we should see this movie.
Because it's a movie that doesn't stop delivering. There's no, to me, there were no boring parts in this movie. It just keeps on. The ride keeps on going. It's thrilling. It's fascinating. And like I said, a lot of action, a lot of comedy. And the chemistry between the two leads is great. And it's a good escape from your daily life. Go watch it, everybody.
And the funny thing about this movie, Rob, which I think you'll like it, as we're here at the movies with our Sports Report New York Mets analyst and William Patterson, DJ, and he's also Rob Morosca, who's also coming out with his own show. It's a Miserable Life, coming out to a website and podcast near you shortly. What's good about this movie? It's a very quick movie. You see some movies and they go long and the storyline develops and it develops and it develops and you're kind of waiting for the punchline. With Stuber is pretty much, it develops from the very first scene in the movie where, the main villain in the movie sort of, has an interaction without giving it away with, Bautista's then, patrol mate, and sort of Bautista's on this chase to sort of find and bust this guy, and he's come close a couple of different times in the case, and where the comedy comes in with this one, which is where I think it's a very fun movie and it's a fast developing movie, is that Bautista's character, who's Stuber, who's sort of the other main character in the movie, comes in is because he's an Uber driver and Bautista can't see, and he's supposed to go to his daughter's kind of art exhibit where she's, showing off this new sculpture, and, he can't drive, and he just had this big surgery, and, he's almost like a walking idiot, but he's this like genetic freak, and that's kind of where, it sort of develops into this movie, and you see a whole bunch of different storylines, and it's very Lethal Weapon-ish, Police Academy, any type of, comedy movie or cop buddy movie, and, Stuber and Bautista's character, which Yak, what was his name in the movie, just so our listeners get a sense of what his name was in this movie?
You're talking about the actor or his character?